This episode is sponsored by Student Growth Partners, your trusted partner in helping universities grow their enrollments. If you enjoy this podcast, please like, subscribe, and share it with friends who might find it valuable. Your support helps us reach more listeners and continue bringing you expert insights from the world of higher education. Welcome to the latest episode of the Enrollment Clinic. My guest today is Alves. He is the Global Chief Commercial Officer at Airways Aviation Group. And when I was thinking about recording this new episode, I always thought of Alex because, just to give the audience a little bit of background, we met in Morocco at a higher education trade show or fair, and just seeing a lot of aircraft models there, I'd never thought of higher education and aviation together. So welcome, Alex.
Thanks. Happy to be here with you.
I wanted to start with your background and how did you get into aviation and especially the education side of aviation?
Okay, that's a long story. I don't know how many hours we have.
Very quick, very briefly.
I ended up in aviation by chance. So I started in the Portuguese military. I'm Portuguese. And my dream was always to become an army officer. And I did it. So I studied in the military school, then military academy. So that was my university, or the counterpart of West Point in Portugal. So 5-year course, I graduated and I became an army officer. Infantry, special forces, that was what I was doing. And suddenly I realized that's not what I want. This is a little bit different from what I wanted. I saw myself 20 years in the future and I didn't like what I saw. And now after 20 something years, honestly, the vision that I had was not that different. So it's difficult to be a professional officer in Europe and in Portugal in my particular case. So I decided to leave, and for a period of time I was without a heading. I didn't know where to turn, what to do. No. And by chance, my father said, well, I have a friend, he's a captain in an airline. Why don't you become, they said that they're recruiting cabin crew. Why don't you become a cabin crew? I said, are you crazy? Going from special forces to cabin crew. But that idea stick with me. And I said, maybe I really need to change because I was fed up of that life. And I applied and I started. The cabin crew, just to give the perspective, the cabin crew position in Europe is quite different from the US. It's still a more it's a profession that is still it still has some glamour, and the salaries are quite good comparing to the average salary all over Europe. So I thought, why not? Let me do it for a period of time, travel a little, and maybe I'll find out what I want to do. And that's how I started 20 years ago. And I never left aviation, so of course, because I had a different idea of what I wanted to do in my life, and I was always very active. And even when I was in the army, I always had side businesses. I was always very entrepreneurial. I opened my first company when I was 18, so I always did 2 or 3 things at the same time. So in the airline, I quickly reached the top of career in 5 years. So I was the head of cabin crew services in a private jet company. After 5 years, I started, and I started working in the security department of the airlines because I had my military experience. Then because of my business experience, I started doing logistics, selling business jets, and then it really ended up quickly. And I eventually became part of the board of the different companies, business jet companies. And I ended up in training 10 years ago by chance as well. I was invited by a businessman to open a business jet company, actually, and a maintenance company, which I did. But in the process, so we started the maintenance company. In the process of getting the AOC, which is the airline certificate, so the approval that is required to be an operator, he decided to sell his jets, and I was there already working with him, and he said, okay, but I have this flight school here that I just acquired. It needs some support, and you are my consultant. Why don't you look into that? So this was 10 years ago. So I went to it. We managed it for 3 years. I grew it. We sold it to L3 Aries, a US company, with an interesting profit. And then I stepped out. I was hired by another company to do the same. We sold this other school also with an interesting profit in 22. Then I got hired by my current employer, Aries Aviation, to also restructure, rebrand, and expand. So I can say very briefly, so looking at my past, that what I've been doing in the last few years, and actually looking way back my experience, I can say I'm a troubleshooter. So I go into companies, find the problems, turn them around, and usually sell the companies for profit. So that's what I do.
That's a highly in demand skill. You know, everybody wants to, make money, turn everything into something profitable. But one interesting thing about your background and your story, because I feel like we all have been through it, and it's a kind of a recurring theme, is that sometimes when you kind of have this period of time where you do nothing and you have zero direction, that's when things happen, creativity comes in, or just chance comes in, and then you get into something that you never thought you would, and
That
you
is
love
true.
it, right?
And
Yeah.
aviation has a problem because when it gets into you, it doesn't get out.
Oh yeah.
I've done other things even during this period. There's a period of my life that I was living in Africa, in Mozambique. I was managing a big group of companies with agribusiness, railway maintenance, so different number of companies, food distribution. But in the end, it was always the aviation calling me. That's what I want to do. I think that's something that anyone that works in this industry, regardless of the position or the area that they're working, it's really a disease that gets into you, a healthy disease. It gets into you, and it's very difficult to get out. It's a passion. So you combine the passion with the rational thinking, and aviation is really interesting industry, very vibrant, very challenging. Really, there's no boring times actually. So it's fun.
I mean, this is a good segue into talking a little bit about the industry, especially from an educational perspective overall, right? So you're at Airways Aviation Group, which is obviously based in Dubai, right? And what does that market look like? What are your educational competitors? How is it divided geographically? I would love to get some background on that.
Yeah, so we are quite different from our peers. Let's say I don't see the market as our competitors. We are all working in the same market, but with different approaches. So we are actually based in Dubai, in the UAE, as you mentioned, but our original first company, let's say, was in Australia. So we are part of our aviation group belongs to Rihanna Group, which is a family office of an Australian entrepreneur. So he has a wide range of businesses related with real estate, tourism, yachting, helicopters. He has a very, very large and long experience in the education sector, and he sold for a few hundred millions, a very large education company that he had before. And he decided to do something in the aviation area, combining his experience in the education industry, his passion with aviation, as he's a helicopter pilot, and he loves aviation since he's a kid. And he decided to do something that until today, this was 10 years ago, we don't see anyone else doing it. So bringing that education vision to an industry that is typically more technically oriented, and it's just a pilot training and nothing else. So we do more. So we pivoted. Our headquarters is really in Dubai, but we are now in 15 countries where we have different levels of schools. We start with what we call a foundation school, which is something that we can open very quickly and easily. I would say it's more than anything else, it's a recruitment center. We provide non-accredited courses. 1 month, let's call it a 1 month foundation course, is a very thorough assessment of the candidate skills to become pilot. So this works well in some certain areas of the globe, specifically on non-English speaking countries where they struggle with English.
Yeah.
We have these schools in India, in China, in Middle East, in Africa. And so we provide for a really low investment. The first, we offer the candidates to be faced with the aviation terminology, the subjects that they will need to study if they decided to move along. We face them with we use desktop simulators to train them with specific things. We train them in English, in maths, in physics. In the end, they take oral and written exams, which I would say, although it's just 1 month, it's very similar to a PPL course.
Mm.
And this really prepares the students that want to continue to when they start their airline pilot training course, they have the fundamentals already very well in their heads. It's not so scary for them.
Mm.
But also the ones that we feel that are not capable, we tell them you don't need to spend $100,000 or whatever. Just maybe you fit in more doing a maintenance technician course or a cabin crew course or whatever.
Mm.
Or if we see that they have the capability, but they need to study more, we guide them through that. Okay, we tell them, okay, go and study these subjects, come back in 2 or 3 months, and we redo your test free of charge, and we'll see how it goes. Once they're fully ready, then we give them the options. We have courses in Australia, in France, in Italy, in Portugal, and a number of other countries, different licenses, different levels, and different levels of prices as well. And we have all of these offers, so it's basically up to them where they want to train, where their budget fits in, where they are personally feeling better to study. I'm in France currently. We have a very large school here, and of course, I would say that the students that are coming from French-speaking countries would feel more comfortable to train in France. Although all our training is done in English, of course, the day-to-day life outside the school is it's French. Or if they have family in Portugal, for example, or if they like the good weather of my country, which is I'm a little biased on that, but there are a different number of subjective reasons to choose one rather than the other. But as far as I know, there's no other aviation training organization that offers what we're offering, such a wide global coverage. And we are expanding. So I joined the group 2 years ago. It will be 2 years in January, almost 2 years. And I opened 7 countries in just 2 years. So next year it's going to be a little bit quieter. We need to consolidate. We acquired some companies as well. We've grown quite a lot in the last 10 years, and mostly through acquisition. So we always grow organically, and we grew in some countries purely organically, but in others like Italy, we opened organically there, but we just expanded by acquiring an existing school, 30 years old of experience. So if you look at our portfolio, we've acquired around 10 schools in those different countries. So we go back to over 45 years of experience. We trained over 30,000 aviation professionals so far from different courses.
Yeah, I'm curious. I wanted to go back to the training classes, and it's an interesting model just to offer students kind of almost like a taste, a sampling of here is what it is, and then put them through a funnel that way, to get them to.
But we also do it in the other end. So what we do, so that's how they start. Then they do let's say, airline pilot training. But at the end, we also always partner with higher education institutions, so universities, colleges, and we offer a higher education to our students. It's not mandatory, but we always recommend, because again, we see ourselves as an education and training company, not a flight training company. So we want to do more. It's very important for especially the pilots that come to us they need to focus on the technical skills for sure, but they need to see that more and more it's necessary to have another set of skills.
Are you talking about general education classes when you partner with universities, or are you talking more kind of like business and, what are we talking about?
Yeah, usually yes. So we have, depending on the country. So we started this in Australia with the Southern Cross University, with Griffith University. They have specific aviation degrees, so bachelor and master degrees. So we try to integrate them within the pilot course.
Gotcha.
In France, we did the same with the Montpellier Business School, which is I think over almost 130 years old university here in Montpellier. So what we did is in 2 years, while they are doing the pilot training course, they're combining with a bachelor in management with a minor in aviation. So
Gotcha.
specialized in aviation.
Gotcha.
So this will help them. For me, it's important for two reasons. First of all, the pilot career is probably the only one, or one of the few, at least that comes to my mind, that every 6 months they go to the simulator and they can be grounded. Every year, or above 45 years old, every 6 months they go to do a medical exam, and if they don't pass, they are grounded. So they are always in the thin line to be out of job if they are not fit or if there is an issue.
Interesting.
So, and I know a few pilots that late in their lives they got eye issues and they cannot fly anymore, so they lost their license, or they got, I know one particularly got epilepsy, which is also not allowed anymore, and he had no backup plan. So if they have some higher education, this is a backup plan for them. They can do something else. It also, this is the first reason. The second reason is if they want to grow, even in the airline they are working on, if they want to go into managerial positions, they need to have other kind of training, other kind of vision. So more and more the airlines are looking for pilots, and I'm just talking about pilots, but we can do also for cabin crew and for maintenance technicians, whatever, but specifically pilots that have a different vision, that can understand the business, that can help grow the business. Because when we are managing an airline, we have to look into a different number of things: cost management, human resources, and in the past, the pilot was just there to fly the airplane and that's it. But today, no, they need to consider costs. They need to see if they can save some fuel on the taxi or on the flight, if there's ways of saving fuel, managing the human resource, the passengers, the crews. So it's necessary to have a wide variety of skills that purely the standard pilot training courses don't provide. So from day one, that's what we try. So we have this funnel in the beginning, but we also have it in the end. So we want to complete we call it the Airline Pilot Pathway Program. So from zero to college, to university degree.
And would this be a Montpellier diploma when they graduate, or is it like a joint, they get Montpellier diploma for finishing kind of the general education, and then they get a special diploma from you?
Yes, so it's two different things. So because the aviation industry is not under any education regulation, it has a specific one. So we issue in the specific case of France or Italy or Portugal, it's called an EASA license. So EASA is our FAA. It's the European Agency. What do you call it? First, European Aviation Safety Agency. So it's the agency that depends directly from the European Commission that regulates all the aviation in this space. It has right now, I think, 31 countries. So all the European Union countries, plus some that are not part of the European Union, but like Switzerland, Norway, or Iceland. So they are also part of EASA. And currently, like FAA in the past, EASA is now the most strict regulator in the aviation world, and it's also the reference. So our training, our regulation, because it's so strict, it's becoming the reference worldwide. Even the US has started to implement things that for us we've been doing it in many years. So when you have an EASA license, you can go and work almost anywhere. You just do very easy conversion. If we want to have a FAA license, it's so easy, the process of conversion. I think we need to do a 20-question quiz and a flight skill test, and they give us a license. If an FAA pilot wants to do the same in Europe, they have to do all the 14 subject exams. They have to do a flight training program, and so it's much more complicated. So this is what they get in the end. They get a school certificate, of course, but the license, which is issued by the aviation authority, and then on the side they have the university diploma that is issued by them.
And who is your typical student? I'm always curious, like, who is the typical students in terms of that has an eye for aviation that you meet into fairs and in your classes?
Yeah, aviation is still one of the few professions that combines, as I mentioned before, the passion with the rationality. So it
Mm,
has the rational side because it's still a well-paid profession to become a
mm,
pilot. It's
mm,
worldwide. I don't see any country where it's not one of the top paid careers.
mm.
So that's the rational part, but then it combines with the passion, right?
Yeah,
It's the office with the best view. It's really even if you fly all your career the same type of aircraft and the same route, it will never be the same. The weather it's never the same. The
right.
crew is not the same. The
Yeah,
passengers are not the same. So even if you
yeah,
do the same, it's probably the most challenging one because you're always every day you are facing different conditions,
right.
and it's quite fun because of that.
Yeah,
It's not a 9 to 5 desk office.
right.
Um, but because of this passion, typically we're talking about men still, more and more women, but still the majority is men. I'm saying right now, I would say 85%
Yeah,
are men and the rest women. We are
yeah.
growing our female intakes, but we need to push more. But this passion starts when they're kids, young kids. It starts
Yeah.
from because they have somebody in the family or that is in the industry, or they have a friend, or they live near an airport, so they see the planes, and this passion starts
Mm,
really
yeah,
from a young age, and
yeah,
it just stays there. So we also try to promote this. We go to schools, we do presentations, we do education fairs, and try to show them.
right.
A lot of people still don't understand that this is a possibility. I got a
Of
girl
course.
in an education fair saying, "Oh, can women be pilots?" And I was shocked. I said, "Oh, are you 21st century? How are you, a woman, telling me this? Of course, you can be whatever you want." So there's still a lot that we can do to try to promote the profession, but it's still not for everyone. It's still an expensive profession. I'd say most of our students they require bank loans
Yeah.
to get it. So depending on the country, it's easier or harder, but it's still a high investment course. I know that in the US is different from Europe because the universities there are all very expensive, but in Europe we don't face those issues. So
Right.
we have public universities that are almost free,
Yeah.
and but even the private ones, they are expensive. But comparing the pilot course is quite expensive. But
Yeah.
you also get a return very quickly because after 2 years you are working and you start getting I think the junior first officer in Europe probably starts getting around, let's say, $75,000, and after 1 year they're getting more than double, and so
Yeah.
easily they get a
Yeah.
senior captain can get up to $400,000-$500,000 a year.
Oh wow. I didn't realize it was that I mean,
Yes,
I
yes.
thought it was maybe, 150, 200
Yeah,
max, but
depends
wow.
on the country and depends on the
Yeah.
airline. So if you go, I
Yeah.
think in Europe the company that pays the more is Lufthansa,
Okay.
and the senior long haul senior captains are getting more or less that, but
Wow.
that's what
Okay.
the US airlines are paying now, so it's
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
because there's a shortage of pilots there. But just completing your going into your question, so our, let's say, our 85% standard profile is a young boy with an average from 18 to 23, 24. So this represents, I would say,
Yeah.
85% of our target. But then we have the exceptions. We have older guys. We just started the year in France in November, a new intake. And we have a guy that he was a professional football player. Actually, the last club he played soccer, not football,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the last club he played was actually LA Galaxy. He was in the
Oh
US,
wow.
so he was
Okay.
really a professional. So he did a good career. He got good salaries, and then he decided to become a pilot. So he just started with us. So he's
That's
much older.
fantastic.
Yeah, it is. It's much older, but so we have these exceptions, and I see more and more that is changing. Now there's no age limit to start. You have an age limit to retire still, so it's mandatory retirement to transport passengers. It's 65.
Okay.
But above that, as long as you pass your medicals, you can still be a flight instructor in a
Right.
school like ours, or you can still do simulator instruction.
Okay.
You can still do some aerial works like firefighting or crop spraying. But
Okay.
passenger transport, you can only do up to 65.
Interesting.
But there's no limit to start. So you can start your course with 60
Yeah.
if you want to do it for 2 years. That's it.
Yeah.
But this
And,
is broadening our market, and we see more and more people coming from different professions. The guys at doctors, actually dentists, doctors,
yeah.
that they have, because when they started, they were not able to do it for financial reasons or because of age limits or
Yeah.
whatever. But now they're coming into the profession.
And is that an area that you are actively marketing to, for example, these, adult learners, which we
No,
would say, it's
I
not, it's
can
just
no.
by chance. You don't think there's
Yes,
an opportunity there?
there is, but it's really a small percentage. If still,
Mm,
it's so if we would have to market just for these guys, I think it would be complicated because the profiles are so different. So we
mm,
wouldn't know what would be our target. So
mm,
we really focus on our standard target, which is
mm,
the 17 to 25, let's say. So end of high school, beginning or
mm.
finishing or middle of university, and then we have the exceptions. But those exceptions, we try to cater them with doing open days, which are open
Yeah,
to anyone that wants to attend, and we do seminars, we do podcasts like this. So this
yeah,
is
yeah.
trying to attract those non-typical, the
Interesting.
ones that don't fit on our typical target. Yeah.
Interesting. And what are the fastest growing markets from a recruitment enrollment standpoint for you?
In terms of okay, geographically,
New
the
students,
markets.
yeah, new students.
It depends. It's very tricky. It's a good question because it's never the same. It varies even during the year, and depending on the region. Let's say, so for example, let's talk about Australia, where we started.
Mm,
Australia is typically a country that is known to be an education hub. People
yeah,
from all the Asia Pacific region typically goes to Australia or New Zealand, but mostly to
yeah.
Australia to study in the universities, but also to do pilot courses.
Mm,
With COVID, Australia was probably, if not the most strict, one of the strictest country during COVID. So they were first to close and the last to open. And at that time, we had 90% of our students coming from international markets. So suddenly
yeah,
they were forced to leave. So we had to, okay, go home. And until this year, as we speak, so from 2020 until now, we were not able to get any international students. So the country reopened, but the visas for international students didn't reopen. And our company, together with others and even universities, we tried to lobby the government and show that the country is losing
yeah,
millions and millions.
yeah,
And they came to us saying, okay, we can give you a quota, but the quota was insignificant. Imagine that we were getting 100 pilot students a year, and they gave us like 10%.
yeah.
But I'm very happy that last week we got a letter from the government, and of course the industry, saying that they are reopening with immediate effects the student visa for all kinds of courses in Australia. So as long as they fit in the requirements in terms of showing that they have the means of sustainability to be there, they are allowed to get a student visa. So we are very,
Mm,
very happy with that. But what we did, basically, we pivoted to the domestic market. So suddenly we are really growing a lot in the
mm,
domestic Australian market, really, really a lot. So much that we are opening our third base there in
mm.
Brisbane. So we're going to have a base in Brisbane, in the Gold Coast, and in Lismore. And but then we go to Europe, and you'll see that we are pretty stable in France. We are growing 35% year on year in France
That's
since
stable.
COVID.
That's stable.
For me, it's the growth is stable. It's a stable growth,
That's a
right?
good number. 30% year over year. It's a great
Yeah,
number.
I'm counting since COVID, right? Because we really
Yeah, yeah. No, that's true.
rock bottom when in COVID. So we're growing. It's okay, and I think we can still keep this kind of growth a couple of years more, and then we need to stabilize, because we can grow more, because
Yeah,
we're talking about flight training, and there's a
mm,
limitation in terms of number of aircraft we can
yeah,
have in
absolutely.
our specific airport. There's slots. There's a number of things. Um, Italy, we're just starting. As I mentioned, we bought a school in September. I see They are working a third of the potential, so I really see a huge growth for next year. So it really depends on the year or the phase of the year. I see some countries that are they grow more in a specific month because typically it's the month where the school year starts. It changes. In Europe, it's mostly September or October. That's the high season. But I would say they are pretty much stable, honestly. One thing that I would like to point out is that we are still more a B2B company than a B2C. I'm trying to balance it more, which means that we are more related with the airlines than the self-sponsored student still. So we work a lot with airlines from the Middle East, from Europe, from the Asia Pacific region. So we do particular tailored programs to their, so they recruit the students and we train them. We also do military and security, so defense contracts, military and security contracts. So we train. I can say right now we have an ongoing contract with German Air Force. We won a tender last year for 3 years to train French Navy pilots. We have done in Africa, for example, the Senegalese Air Force pilots. We have done in the past Australia Security Forces or Defense Forces. We have done the National Guard of Malaysia. So we have quite a wide variety of experience working with governments, security and defense forces, airlines, and that has been our core business. But we are now trying to balance more to the B2C because in my particular view, we need to have it has to have an equilibrium between B2B, B2C, and also an equilibrium between markets. We cannot be over dependent on one specific market. So as we, I don't know if you say that, but we used to say we don't put all the eggs in the same basket. We should spread them a little bit more. Because in aviation, the markets don't follow all the same rhythm. So, for example, the US is now starting to come down. There was a huge shortage of pilots in the US, much more than anywhere else in the world, but now it's coming down. But in Europe, we are still suffering a shortage. So the timings are completely different. So if we are in different regions, we can balance. If one region is worse than the other, we are balancing with the other. So that's what we are trying to do.
From a B2B perspective, do you see a lot of competition? And we mentioned earlier before we were recording the US, China, they're very different markets. Do you see some of these companies like ATP, for example, going global?
Yeah, ATP, I think, well, it's the biggest school in the world, Ab Initio school. So Ab Initio is as you know, and we consider ourselves an Ab Initio company. So we provide the basic training. So once we provide the basic training, they get the pilot license, then they go to do the advanced training, which is usually type rating, and then go to the airline. And so ATP is the biggest Ab Initio company school in the world, in terms of fleet, in terms of locations, whatever. They are only in the US, and I think they're only working the domestic market. I think strategically they don't want to expand, but there are a few large schools in the US that work well the international market, so they compete with us, of course, and we are friends with some of the CEOs of these schools. So we like to have, and I like myself particularly to have a good relation with my competitors or peers. I think we only gain by if the market works well, if everyone works well, we all benefit from it. So I have no problems in actually sitting down and having good meals and discussions with my competitors. So there are a few companies in the US very active internationally. There are a few companies in Europe and also in Australia that are very active internationally, but there's no company covering so many countries like ours, like we do, like our network. And usually they just do pilot training, or they just do maintenance training, or they just do cabin crew training. It's very difficult for finding an organization that covers all these like we do. So I don't see, I don't want to sound pretentious, but I don't see actually a company that we can call competitor. Sorry, but there is, of course, CAE. So CAE is the biggest in the world, but they are by far the biggest in simulator training. They are very, very strong in Ab Initio training, but they have specific partnerships, specific programs. I think they are on a different level. And it's like all three areas, they are publicly traded companies.
Yeah.
And so we are in a different level. They are much bigger than us, but privately owned, and we are 100% privately owned. I think we are the largest, and this allows us to have. I see this is one advantage. Of course, they have much more revenue, money, resources than we do, but we are much more flexible. And this allows us to offer more tailored programs to our B2B customers in particular. We don't promote one specific program. We usually sit down with our potential customer, we listen to what they require, and we try to present a suitable option for what they intend to do. And the other thing that I think it's an advantage for us, because we are smaller, but because we depend on, in the end, on a one-person decision, which is our shareholder. Our decision process is quite fast. Our executive board is made of 4 people. So our chairman, the CEO, myself, and another person. So we're only 4. So it's quite easy process, quite flexible, and this is a good example. I can tell you that last week I was together with the chairman. We went to do a due diligence on another school that we may buy or not. This was last week, and today we sent the offer. So we did a really thorough due diligence in 1 week.
Wow. Okay.
And I don't think that there are a lot of companies that can do it so quickly.
Yeah.
So that helps out. One of the challenges is how can we keep growing, and as we grow, we need to increase the team and the processes. But keep growing, but also keep this flexibility and quick decision-making process. That's one of the challenges that we are thinking about. How can we keep it for next year?
Yeah. I mean, this is a fascinating discussion, Alex. I feel like we could sit here and talk for hours. But as we're getting close to kind of wrapping it up, one area that I wanted to talk to you about was specifically AI. In my mind, again, I'm not in that industry. I'm thinking just like driverless cars, I would think we're going to have driverless airplanes, right? So
yeah. Oh, we will.
And I'm sure you it's something
just a matter of time.
Yeah. So how do you kind of mitigate for that, right? You're recruiting students, but then at the end of the day, this may be one of those areas where AI will be a huge disruptor.
Yes, it will happen, but I have no doubt that it will happen. But for me, it will take still a long time.
Why is that?
Many reasons. First of all, the technology is not reliable enough yet. Of course, we have UAVs, UAPs, whatever. I don't know what they call it. You have all these unmanned aerial vehicles, mobility, whatever. Even in the airlines, most of the flight is 95% of the flight, or 90% is done by the autopilot already. But the human is there as do you call it?
Like a safety, kind of like a double
also
measure.
Safety, but it is. What you call it? There, I forgot my word in Portuguese. So many languages in my head, I'm confused. But the human being is a safety measure that is there, and also the second pilot as well, because there's always a redundancy. That was the word I was trying to look for. If you go into Airbus, for example, there's always like 4 systems redundant to each other. So if one doesn't work, there's another, and there's another. And the human is there as a redundancy. If all the systems go down, or if there's a problem, there's a human. And if that human goes down, there's a second human. So I know that there's recently, especially in the US, there have been huge discussion about the single pilot operation. And it will happen, but it will take some time. I think, so one of the reasons is the technology is still not there yet. It will be. The second thing is the psychological factor. People are still not yet comfortable to get inside the plane without anyone sitting in the front. This will take years. But if you go back into the aviation history, not that many years ago, I would say like 60 years ago, we had 5 people in the cockpit. So we had the captain, the co-pilot, the navigator, the flight engineer, and the radio telegraphist. This was the first to go down with the development of radios. Then the navigator. Then when I started in aviation, so 20 years ago, I still flew with 3 guys in the cockpit. We still had the flight engineer, the co-pilot, and this was the last one to go. So the first officer will be the next one to go. It will take some years, but he will go, and then we will have maybe a few decades where we'll have one guy in the cockpit, supported by AI, which will be a more reliable and trained AI. And then in the future, where I probably won't be alive or will be very old, then we will be without anyone there. But first, this has to happen in cars, smaller vehicles. There is these projects of these UAPs or UAVs or OEMs that so it has to start somewhere. They will start using it, and then it will start developing into the bigger airliners. But it will take some time, I would say. It's a matter of time, and also the AI. As you know, we are already using a lot of things in AI in training. So to assess, to help out creating questions or assess the behavior of the student or whatever. But the AI needs to learn. So there's a period of learning that takes time. It takes. It will take, I would say, a couple of years because they really need to face thousands of candidates to be able to learn about all the answers, all the physical, if they are looking into the face, the expressions, this and this. So there's a learning process that it's long. And even for that we are already using the human reaction or the assessment that we do from another human. It's still AI is not there yet. Our brain is still the most powerful AI that exists. And
it makes me think of something I read a while back that was predicting that by 2025, Uber was predicting that roughly about 60% of the cars on the road will be AI kind of cars. So this is 10 years ago, and they're predicting.
You see how many are there?
And no,
it takes time. It takes time.
I think of that quote. We were what was that? The Peter Thiel quote that we were promised flying cars. We got 144 characters. It's like
it will happen. I have no doubt, but it depends on a number of things that are not there yet. And we also have been talking about the sustainability of aviation, the power plant. So how can we introduce new technology that creates less emissions? And a lot of the industry is focusing on this and not in the cockpit itself. And this is a discussion that it's very present. Most of the countries signed the 2050 emission agreement that should be carbon neutral in 2050. Now everybody's pulling back because they realize the technology is not allowing to do that. So it will happen, but it will also take longer. There's a process. We can try to impose dates, but in the end, the reality comes against us. It says it's not feasible in those dates. So we will do it, but it will just take a little bit more time. So, and it's the reality for the power plants, for the engines. It's also the reality for the AI implementation. But we are already using it for training, like VR as well. We are starting implementing virtual reality to train the procedures, to help out the students before they go to the aircraft. Also the cabin crew to visualize. We can give them, they can train at home and visualize the aircraft.
That's cool.
There's also augmented reality that is starting to be implemented as well, and I think it will be very useful because it's a jump in terms of feelings and the reality from VR. It's really a next step level. So technology is here and it's being implemented. And even today, if you look at our operation, the standards or the basics are the same as they were 40 years ago, but we are training. So we are, for example, in our organization, we are paper free. So the students don't touch on paper anymore. So they have an iPad, everything is digital. We have a bunch of apps that support with ebooks, CBTs, specific apps for the flight training part. We have simulators that replicate the aircraft. And in the US, they are not so fan of using simulators yet. I know they are starting to, but for us in Europe, we are using simulators for years. It really helps out to expedite the training and to train a lot of things safely that we cannot do in the aircraft. And just and if the student is not performing in that particular mission, we just repeat and repeat and repeat with a lower cost. And then also going to the aircraft, we have now what we call glass cockpit, which is basically all those old analog displays are just replaced by digital displays, touch screens. A lot of the systems that they are going to face when they're flying the big airliners, we are already using them in our small aircraft. So technology is here and it keeps being updated. Even the engines, we are the type of fleet that we use. We use a lot of Diamond aircraft, which is like a very expensive aircraft. It's like BMW, Mercedes of the general aviation aircraft.
Gotcha.
And we also use Cirrus, which is a US company. So it's really high-end aircraft. This is where we position ourselves as well. We're not a low-cost, low-end school. We want at least, or we see ourselves in the tier one of the flight training organization. So, and the type of aircraft and type of equipment is part of it. But even the engines, if you look at what we operate, we consume less 20%, between 20 to 40% less than competitor aircraft that the other schools, our competitors use. If you go into the airlines, it's the same. If you operate a 737 MAX, for example, comparing to 737 early generation, it burns, I would say, 30-40% less fuel. So technology is, and in aviation particularly, is one of the industries that really is at the forefront of implementing technology and developing new technologies. And I have no doubt that we will continue to do it. And
I was just going to say, I mean, it's amazing to me how many flights there are, millions of flights.
Millions. Every day, I think it's around 270,000.
Yeah. And
commercial flights, it's not included, it's not completely military flights or training flights.
This I'm just talking about.
Let's say 500,000 flights a day or something like that.
When you think of like accidents or issues, they're just so minimal.
Really low, really low.
That's
part of the training. That's part of all of this that we've been talking.
Yeah.
It's the technology. So the more technology you have, the less risk you have. Is the quality of the training. The more training and better training, the less risk you have. So the regulation as well. So the more regulation you have, the less risk you have. So all of this combined, this is what makes aviation and air transport the safest way of moving around, which is really true. And but just going in to complete what you asked. So even when all of this is implemented and the airplanes will be automated, let's say, or run by an AI, in that part, we are already be flying into Mars and somewhere else. So pilots will always be necessary. So there will always be something to pilot.
That's true. Now I have a last question that I like to ask a lot. What is one thing that we're not talking about, or we're not talking enough about, when it comes to aviation education and training?
Well, it really depends on the country. Also, for example, the US is a country, as I mentioned you when we were off, that it's pretty much about volume. They focus about volume and they don't focus about other things. So outside the US, we focus more on these higher education things and non-technical skills. I think it's very important, the non-technical skills that the airlines look for. I think one of the main issues is that there's still a big gap between the airlines and the flight training organizations. I think we need to be more integrated. It's starting to be. We see a lot of airlines opening their own schools or buying or doing agreements with schools like ours and being involved in the training. But I think there's still a big gap, and that's the main thing. Because we are trying to follow a route, and sometimes that route is not what the market is looking for. We think it's the best one, but then the airlines have a completely different idea. So I think that's the main. We have our vision, but the market speaks for itself. Maybe our vision is not right. I think it is, because our students are really employed very, very quickly, which sometimes even me, I'm surprised. They complete the course and after 1 month, 2 months, they're employed, which is great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's probably one of the things that should be more tackled. It's the
Just communication
integration
between,
of the initial flight training and then the operators, which will be the end users of our students. Yeah,
Interesting.
that's it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Alex. This has been fantastic, and I'm
It's
sure
great. We have so much to
love
talk.
to.
We have to do 3 or 4 more.
I'd love to. So, let's plan it out. Let's do a whole series of, aviation education training. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.